Ben was scrolling through social media one day between meetings. One guy had just flown off to Europe for the weekend, another had bought a brand new car, and a third posted a photo of coffee, a watch, and a laptop like that somehow counted as net worth. And that's when Ben caught himself thinking, where exactly does he fit in this whole wealth picture? Is he actually moving up, or does he just look sharp in a suit while quietly panicking inside his banking app? Because people throw around words like middle class, upper middle class, and rich all the time. But when Ben started digging deeper, he realized pretty fast that most people have no idea what real dollar amounts sit behind those labels. And the numbers are, to put it mildly, not what most people imagine. And the most important part is, this is not just about curiosity. Once Ben understands where he is now, it gets a whole lot easier to figure out where he wants to go next. It also gets a lot easier to stop comparing himself to somebody else's rented luxury on his feed. The first thing Ben had to sort out was one simple but important point. Average wealth and median wealth are not the same thing at all. And this is exactly where a lot of people get confused. According to the latest data, the median net worth of an American household is about $192,900. Median means the middle. Half of households have less, and half have more. But average net worth is already over $1 million. Yes, that gap is enormous. And no, it's not because everyone around Ben is secretly a millionaire. It's because the wealthiest families at the top have so much money that they pull the average way up. So far up, actually, that it barely reflects normal life anymore. Put it this way, if there are 100 people at a party and 3 of them grab a third of all the pizza, you can't honestly turn around and say everyone got about the same amount. Wealth in America works pretty much the same way. The top 1% of households controls almost a third of all the wealth in the country. That's why the average American looks a lot richer on paper than in real life. So Ben stopped staring at one big number and started breaking the whole thing into levels. Where do the real financial lines actually sit? The lower class starts where net worth is tiny, or basically non-existent. If Ben's net worth were somewhere between $0 and $16,900, he would technically fall into that group. The average net worth there is a little over $6,000. That's not much. Less than what a lot of people spend on a vacation or a decent used car. But Ben also realized pretty quickly that this is not the moment for drama. A recent college graduate with student debt can end up here. So can someone coming out of a divorce, or someone who got hit hard by medical bills. One rough stretch in life is not a permanent sentence. That said, life at this level is hard for more than just obvious reasons. When Ben doesn't have much money, almost everything gets more expensive. It's harder to get decent credit, harder to build a cushion, harder to absorb unexpected costs. When the financial buffer is close to zero, even a simple car repair can kick off a chain reaction of new debt. Then comes the lower middle class. That's a net worth of roughly $16,900 to $43,000. At that level, Ben might already have a steady job, a little savings, maybe a retirement account through work, maybe modest housing. And this is where things get frustrating. A lot of people in this category make too much to qualify for serious help, but too little to actually feel secure. Next is the middle class. That's roughly a net worth between $58,550 and $169,420. The median net worth inside that group is around $145,200. This is the zone most people picture when they think of the normal version of the American dream. At this level, Ben usually has housing, retirement savings, and enough stability to survive a smaller financial shock without everything falling apart. This is no longer pure paycheck-to-paycheck survival mode, but it's also not a life where money stops mattering. Ben still has to plan, budget, and make choices. And honestly, that's the strength of the middle class. This is where financial discipline really starts to pay off. Then things get more interesting. The upper middle class is roughly a net worth between $500,000 and $2 million. At this level, a lot of people already feel rich, and Ben gets it. $500,000 or $1 million sounds serious, but by American standards, this still isn't the top. This is where you often find high earners, doctors, lawyers, engineers, executives, professionals who seem to be doing everything right and making very good money. But this is also where Ben noticed one of the sneakiest traps in personal finance: lifestyle inflation. Income goes up, and almost immediately immediately, everything else goes up with it. The apartment turns into a bigger house. The normal car becomes an expensive SUV. Rare dinners out become a regular habit. And suddenly, someone is making several times more than they used to, but somehow still feels just as financially tight. From the outside, these people look comfortable, maybe even wealthy, but their actual assets often grow much more slowly than they could. Because a bigger income does not always mean bigger wealth. Sometimes it just means more expensive habits. A lot of people in the upper middle class also put serious money into real estate, their own home, rental properties, investment condos, and yes, there's logic to that. Real estate can go up in value, bring in rental income, and offer tax advantages. But Ben saw a trap here too. Not everything that looks impressive is actually making him richer. Sometimes an expensive house is not an asset. Sometimes it's just beautifully packaged monthly stress. The upper class starts at around $2,650,000 in net worth. But even here, there's a catch. Someone worth $3 million or even $5 million is absolutely rich. No point arguing that. But that still is not always the level where money turns off financial stress completely. That version of Ben may have a nice house, expensive cars, travel, and investments, but he's often still working, still calculating, still making decisions with a budget in mind. It's just a much bigger budget now. And then you get into the zone where the numbers start sounding almost unreal. To make it into the top 1% of American households, Ben would need a net worth of roughly $5,800,000. Some estimates put that threshold even higher, closer to $10 million or even $12 million. At that level, money starts working in a way a normal salary simply can't. Income from assets alone can be higher than the yearly income of an entire middle-class family. And above that, there are the tiny groups at the very top where you need tens of millions of dollars. Around $62 million and up is a completely different league. That's not just a lot of money. Money moves differently there. It gets invested differently. It opens doors most ordinary people never even think about. And here's what's especially strange. The higher Ben climbs up that ladder, the bigger the gaps become. Between middle class and upper middle class, you're talking hundreds of thousands. Between upper middle class and rich, you're talking millions. Between rich and the true elite, you're talking tens of millions. That's why even very wealthy people can sometimes feel not that rich if they keep comparing themselves to people above them. There's one more factor that changes the entire picture if Ben ignores it: geography. The exact same net worth can buy completely different lives in different places. Ben, with $2 million in a small town, might live like a king. Big house, space, comfort, peace, and quiet. Ben, with that same $2 million in Manhattan, is doing fine. Not poor, not struggling, but definitely not living like some mogul with a gold staircase in a penthouse. The same thing goes for income. In one state, getting into the top 1% takes more than $1 million a year. In another, it takes just over $416,000. That difference is massive. And this is the main conclusion Ben came to. The point is not to slap a label on himself. These categories are useful as a map, not as a sentence. People move between them all the time, and most of the time it's not magic. It's behavior. How Ben spends, how he saves, how he invests, how he handles income once it starts going up, and most importantly, whether he understands the difference between looking rich and actually being rich. Social media trained people to show success through purchases: a car financed to the edge, a house stretched to the limit of the budget, a vacation paid for with money that doesn't even exist yet. It all looks good. But Ben noticed something strange. People who are truly well off are often way more modest than the people trying their hardest to look rich. And the point here is not to live like a monk and be afraid to enjoy anything. Not at all. The point is something else. Before wealthy Ben spends a large amount of money, he does not just ask, "Can I afford this?" He also asks, "What could this money turn into if I invested it instead?" That is the mindset that creates the difference. So, in short, here's the picture. The lower class sits around $6,000 in average net worth. The middle class is roughly $60,000 to $170,000. The upper middle class runs from $500,000 to $2 million. Real wealth starts at around $2,650,000. The top 1% begins at several million and goes up from there. And the real financial canyon opens once you get into the tens of millions.